This is Driving Solutions, exclusively on CBTNews.com.
Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks so much for joining me on another episode of Driving Solutions right here at CBTNews.com. Just like a high-performance car needs quality fuel to deliver exceptional results, high-performing marketing technology also requires premium data. In part 2 of our series with Acxiom, a leader in identity, customer data management, and the ethical use of data, we're diving into identity and data about people. We're pleased to welcome Kyle Hollaway, Senior Vice President and Global Identity Leader at Acxiom, and Amber Daniel, who is the Director of Product Strategy at S&P Polk. Folks, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you coming by the studio. Kyle, let me start with you. Dealers hear a lot about zero, first, second, and third-party data. For the audience that's out there, let's start by helping them understand the difference and also define identity.
Yeah. Okay, Jim, a lot to unpack there, and it's getting kind of complicated with all the different parties involved. So starting with zero party, it's really about where the data originates.
Okay.
So zero party is the consumer.
Okay.
It's information that the consumer has provided directly, like a preference or something about themselves that they've handed to you, right? And so then first party data is really as the dealership or the brand actually collecting data on what they observe. So it's capturing, website information, who's coming by, what's happening within either your digital properties or even in your offline properties. And then on the second party, it's your partners, your friends, where they've collected data. And it's about leveraging that data in conjunction with each other, so a collaborative effort. So that's kind of the second party. And then third party ultimately is the data aggregators, where there's not a direct consumer relationship, but data has been acquired ethically, brought together, and then a result of a data set is put together, and then that's sold back out to the different parties.
Okay. And explain identity.
Identity is a complex item in and of itself, right? To really boil it down, it's about identifying a person across different signals. So that could be just actually us knowing each other, looking at each other, and knowing your face and going like, oh, that's Jim.
Sure.
Or it could be in an online setting where you're seeing a certain device or some type of signal coming across to your digital properties and saying like, hey, I've seen this before.
Right.
And being able to identify that. And then ultimately, the attempt to tie that to a known individual so that you can now engage in more of a direct relationship.
Right. And Amber, could you describe some scenarios where better data about people might help a dealer acquire new customers, drive revenue through the service lane, maybe increase profitability in F&I?
Absolutely. Kyle just mentioned the ability to sort of consolidate identity by combining different data sources. So utilizing those different types of data sources, whether it be zero party or second party data, is a really good way to understand who to target to drive revenue or drive traffic to those different profit centers within the dealership. I think the other point I'd like to make is, understanding who not to target. I think that's also something that we don't talk about enough is, we have all these audiences that we've built regardless of the source, and we're not necessarily spending the time or the energy in suppressing households, if you will, from those audiences for targeting.
Okay, and why is that important?
It's important to, I think something that resonates specifically with dealers is always, how do I save money, right? How do I get more for less?
Right.
And that's one very easy step that you can take to minimize your cost. Dealers, the strategy overall in the space today is around first-party data and understanding in my first-party data that audience, who should I be targeting, who shouldn't I be targeting, understanding more about those customers, and utilizing technology like identity graphs to understand how, or give yourself a better opportunity to reach those customers on an end platform.
Yeah, there's no question that dealers are always looking to minimize their spend in this area. And the worst case scenario is when they're sending things. We've talked about it before on CBT News, where they're sending things to consumers out there, and they're like, "I don't own that car anymore."
Exactly.
In fact, I traded it into you 6 months ago.
Exactly right.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, that's a real problem.
And if I can interject,
Sure.
yeah, just certainly the aspect of tying identity to data is so crucial because you may know a lot of information, but if you're not able to associate it with the right person, then that engagement starts to break down, right? Because you don't realize, oh, that is the person that turned it in 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And so you're addressing them in a different way.
Yeah.
And as Amber was talking about, even in the suppression category, it's knowing who do I know and who do I not know, or who do I not need to know because they're not in market, it's not a relationship that's going to work, and certainly with the prevalence of ongoing, fraud and identity fraud going on, that these are large purchases, and so there's a certain degree of certainty that you want to have in that relationship, and so tying identity to data is such a foundational component.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Kyle, dealers are also hearing more and more about Google sunsetting third-party cookies. What does that mean, and how will that impact what they are doing today and as consumers?
Yeah, so now we're really kind of getting into the technical aspect of things, right? So first, just defining a third-party cookie. A third-party cookie is simply a piece of code that is placed on a website to capture information about a user as they're coming into that website, and has originated just as a means to maintain a certain degree of knowledge over time. So you go to a website and you leave, you come back. You want to kind of start back where you were. Well, a cookie is what helped with that. Well, the third-party aspect of that cookie is then companies started to place cookies to identify you as you moved around the internet, and they used their cookie as a means to do that. Well, now certainly there's some privacy concerns about that, this aspect of I'm being followed across the open internet. And so the reality is that we're already halfway through this process of deprecating third-party cookies. Apple, Mozilla, and others have already deprecated them. And really, we're just talking about Google. Now, obviously, Google has a large land share within the digital ecosystem, so it's kind of more prevalent. But the reality is, we've kind of been dealing in this dual world of some browsers don't have cookies, some do. And so really, the efficacy has really been at 50% at best. And so now, with those going away completely, here in 2024, then now it's time to look at what's the alternative. How do you begin to really recognize individuals that you haven't necessarily seen before to have some kind of informed decision about them? And so there's strategies that are needing to take place for the brand, for the dealership. And this is where we really start talking about first-party data, the importance of first-party data. You have that direct relationship. The consumer's coming to your property. So as you collect that information, being able to persist that, because first-party cookies are not going away. Because there's a direct relationship, and so, regulators and such are not going to get into the middle of that relationship. It's really the third-party relationships where it's not directly with the consumer that is starting to be deprecated. So it's really around managing your first-party data, working with partners, so that second-party aspect of working with partners to say, I know who I know. Do you happen to know this person? And that there's an ethical and privacy-compliant method in doing that, where you're able to get consent from the consumer, you're able to work with your partners who have consent, and then you can kind of share that and have a collective view of an individual. And that's what's starting to emerge in market, and where, for dealers who have maybe been just dependent on third-party software and capabilities to do that. Now they're going to have to own more of their own data and then find ways to more ethically and effectively partner with people to really start to have the scale and understanding of who those are.
And who they partner with is going to be very, very important, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's because you're trusting that third-party provider, with everything, right? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Absolutely. As a good partner, I think the question is, what does a good partner look like? I would say, and a good partner is someone that is a good steward of their data, who is transparent in their process, and helps you sort of define a process to be compliant. And I know we'll talk about that later in the segment, but that is such a critical component, is understanding the practices of your partners.
Right.
The thing I would add to your piece, Kyle, is I think the importance of understanding more about first-party data, right? I think a lot of times what we see is dealerships collecting information, whether it be leads or traffic to a website, utilizing identity solutions to tell more about that person in the way of like additional PII elements. But I think that there's a huge opportunity in the marketplace today. We hear these, 3-letter acronyms or CDPs, DMS, CRM. It's kind of, it's the big topic today.
Sure.
This isn't new to, technology in general, but it is relatively new to our space as it relates to dealers. But understanding how to utilize that data, how you can improve your first-party data, utilizing second-party sources to append information to know, is Kyle in market for a vehicle or is he not, right? We talked about suppression earlier, but being able to, it's really important to partner with companies that understand the value of clean data, number one, right? It's only as good as the efficacy of the data. How can I improve on that data and build on that to make my marketing more effective? Because ultimately that's what we're talking about here, right? How are we enabling marketing in a better way to be more effective?
That's right.
And it's so important. And I keep going back to this suppression component. And you kind of touched on this earlier, but didn't necessarily call it out. But loyalty right now, dealer loyalty is such a huge.
That's right. It's almost the new currency.
It is the new currency. I mean, you've got even though dealers are making more money than they have in a long time, right? We've sort of transitioned away from this volume growth business back to a gross business.
That's right. That's right.
Gross profit.
That's right.
Which I think, for some of us, it's been a breath of fresh air to kind of see the dealers go back to running business like they had forever.
That's right.
And away from, heavy incentives to, a more traditional way of doing business. But that loyalty component couldn't be more important today.
No,
and it's only going to, it's well known what's happening in the industry today. Right. And so understanding how do I make my first party data work for me and my overall goals, which isn't just to sell the vehicles I have on my lot, right? It's to drive business through the service drive, but it's also to you have to play defense.
You do. That you just brought up a good point, because I was going to say my wife and I each drive 2 different cars, and we purchased them at different dealerships, although we purchased both cars together. So both dealerships have all of our information, our emails and our cell numbers and everything on the car. However, one dealership, we'll call it dealership A, because I don't want to get my dealership mad at me, but dealership A does a very good job of communicating with us and as their customer. And dealership B, not so much, And I think that's something that dealers have got to be aware of, is the fact that if you don't take good care of your data and your customer, your competition will.
Exactly.
Right? And so this, to your point, it is running a big defense play. And although it can move over to offense and say, okay, now we need to sell these people their second car or their other cars in their household, because that's another thing where this comes into play, is that we have 2 other vehicles in the household, 2 kids that are at college, and we're purchasing their cars and their servicing and everything else. So this one household's good for not 2 cars, but 4 cars. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And if they're communicating with us properly, where are we going to go?
Yeah.
Right.
And Steve mentioned in the last segment just about some of the studies that have been done, and one of them, showed that over 70% of consumers see the personalization at the dealer as being one of the primary drivers for their return to that dealership. Right.
Makes sense.
It's that ability to know that I'm known.
Yep.
And they've got the right information on me. They communicate well.
That's right.
And understand those preferences is what drives that loyalty and that return, shopping. So
that's right. And instead of these dealers that are continually spending so much money, right, on that conquest customer, talk to us about that. I mean, because you'll find dealers that will spend $100,000, $200,000 a month on advertising. And then you'll ask them, well, how many customers are in your database? And they'll say, 40,000. We've been here 30 years. You're like, oh my gosh. And you're spending that much, to try to win over these other customers. What are you doing to talk to the customers that you currently have, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, you make a good point. We've been in business for 40 years, and I'll take that back and just touch one more time on the hygiene component and the cleanliness of the data, right? Like 40 years worth of data.
Yeah, that's right.
I would say a good portion of that is somewhat
Probably,
useless.
right?
Yes.
That's right.
Yes, but I want to go back to kind of what you touched on and the point that you brought up around understanding the customer and understanding who your audience is. And, there is technology out there, insights available to provide automotive profiles for your first-party data. So providing your first-party data to a trusted partner to build that automotive profile for, what does Jim have in his garage, right? He and his wife have 2 vehicles, but they have two more vehicles just sitting in their garage. And that really tells a story around, what should my marketing strategy be, right? And these are the kind of insights that you should have, or you should be relying on your agency partners to bring to you, right?
Right. Yeah, there's no question about it, because I don't know what I don't know on that. You know what I mean? And I'm a dealer. I think, oh, well, I sold that BMW to that person, and hopefully they come back and they service and they buy their next one. And if they want to sell it, we'll buy it outright. And if they want to trade it, we're ready. And we have got lease offers and such that we can send to that person. But they're missing 3 other opportunities there that are not BMWs. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's huge. I mean, and by the same token, if there's another company out there that has got my data, even though it's first party, maybe I stopped into a dealership, whatever the case might be, and they start doing a really good job of marketing to me, that BMW dealership's in trouble, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think the aspect of dealers are getting so many different signals from so many different channels now. It used to be just who's coming onto your lot.
Right.
I'm going to address them. I'll learn their name and kind of proceed.
That's
but
right.
you only know what you kind of see from that moment.
Yeah.
Whereas now, whether it's through apps on their phone, whether it's through the website, different means they're getting these signals and these leads. But to your point, Amber, is the fact of not just understanding who that is, but then seeing like, oh, they actually have certain propensities. They have loyalties to certain brands, or they have certain socioeconomic capabilities that can really help inform how you personalize that in-person engagement. Simply by working with your partners that have strong data assets.
That's right.
You're able to tie to that identity. Because if you only go off what you know personally, it's only going to be so effective.
That's right.
But when you start networking across that with your partners, with good data, to get those signals, now you can really advance that customer relationship.
Yeah.
Well, personalization goes beyond just what's happening in the dealership, right? You have to get a consumer in the dealership to provide a personalized experience.
Yeah.
And I think the same practices that we use for an in-dealership personalized experience, we can use in our online marketing.
Yeah, for sure. Kyle, what are the risks of not protecting or using data about people ethically?
Well, it's certainly getting higher and higher. So you're seeing a lot of legislation coming out across the U.S. We're not at a national legislation yet, so it's on a state-by-state basis, but the stakes are high. There's starting to be real dollar penalties associated with not handling consumer data correctly. Right. And so one is just from a monetary standpoint, like it's getting tough. Like, you really want to protect that. But more so than that is just the trust with the consumer. There's so much choice in the market. There's so much noise coming at that consumer that it's really about building that trusted relationship. And part of that is knowing that you're handling their data effectively and in a manner that's very safe, and that they can feel good about that relationship. If they don't feel like you're going to keep their information private, and suddenly they're getting phone calls or emails from random places, and they're like, how did you get my info?
Right.
And it comes out that it was from their local dealer or something. Then it really becomes problematic from a relationship standpoint. So both legislative wise, economically, and then just really on the relationship side, those are all key points.
Sure. This question is for both of you, but Amber, I'll start with you. As state privacy regulation increases and regulation like the new Graham, Leach, Bliley safeguard rules take effect, what do dealers need to think about today relative to data and preparing and protecting their business for the future?
I think the number one thing is a documented process of handling data. How do we keep our data secure? And the other part of that is back to relying on partners or partnering with companies who are clearly articulating their processes and how they are good stewards of the data.
Yeah.
I think going to our previous segment as well with Salesforce.
Yeah.
You know, with partners like that, especially as you start moving into the cloud, there's a lot of that stewardship of the data that now resides with the partner, right? You're collecting it as first party, but it's actually sitting outside of your four walls. And so really understanding that partner relationship, both from, you know, data partners that they're ethically managing their data, but also then from the software providers, the marketing clouds that you're integrating with to ensure that the right privacy controls are there, that there's governance, and then the reporting capability needs to be there as well.
Yeah, for sure.
I think there's a secondary component to that, and that's related to second-party data, right? And the partners that you're using there. You know, at S&P and Polk, we're beholden to some pretty stringent requirements from the DPPA, which is, you know, the source of registration data or the governing organization over registration data. And so understanding more about those companies, you know, second-party data providers, I think is also really important, and I think gets lost because most of those relationships are owned oftentimes by agency partners.
Right.
So I think that's something that we need to keep top of mind as we think about,
for
you
sure.
know, because I believe they rolled this out in December of 2022. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, you know, that ship has sailed. Like, we should already be integrating these practices in order to be compliant. And this is nothing new. I mean, the state of Texas, as an example, dealers are accustomed to making these changes and shifting their practices, even down to the most basic things, displaying pricing on the website and having some, you know, very transparent practices in how they do business.
Yeah, for sure. It's always amazing to me that companies, dealerships, they'll work with marketing companies. Maybe it's a direct mail house that called them, or maybe it's some other kind of marketing company, and they'll say, well, we need to download your database, you know what I mean, and send out this marketing piece or what have you. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? You know, you've just now opened up you've given the key to the safe away and said, oh yeah, sure, here it is. Here's all the logons that you need, and I mean, it's 2023. We still doing this.
Well, it's you know, it even goes down to sort of the basics, and that is, you know, Steve mentioned in the previous segment about just overall understanding like the landscape of data.
Sure.
But, you know, back to the fundamentals of even privacy, it's like, how am I sending my data out, right? Am I shipping it off in a CSV via email to said partner?
That's right.
And how are they utilizing it? How are they keeping it safe?
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds silly, but it really is pretty fundamental. And also keeping an inventory of who's received your data.
Yeah.
How are they destroying it? Like, what kind of agreements do we have in place for that destruction of data after
That's right.
an expiration date?
And that stuff is and it's usually not followed up on. You know, I hate to tell you that from the standpoint of the dealership, maybe it's a GSM or a GM or a marketing manager, what have you, that made that deal with that particular vendor. They open up, they never come back around and say, okay, now we need to know that you. Now, I'm painting with a broad brush, dealers, so save the emails. But you know what I'm talking about is that who's checking to make sure that this stuff has been done, right?
Correct.
There's no true audit taking place.
There's not.
Scary.
And I think that's a good point that Steve made also in the previous segment around who are the, you know, what kind of talent are you bringing into the dealership who that can manage these processes and understand how to implement change in the dealership to be able to accommodate these necessary changes.
That's right. Right.
And they also mentioned, you know, to your dealer friend, I think it was at the Packers game, you know, like all these things are coming out. And so the clean room, the data clean room, that's one aspect where now it provides a venue where a dealer can put their data into the clean room in the cloud in a very secure fashion, and then be able to share that with maybe a partner or, you know, even with an agency or whoever, but know that their actual PII or their personally identifiable information is not actually moving anywhere. And so that's a really important piece of kind of the new evolution of technology, and you're seeing it with players like Snowflake or Databricks, others, which are really to facilitate and manage this particular issue, which is how do I share data without downloading my entire customer list, which is really the gas that fuels my business.
There's no question.
And then just shipping it off.
That's right.
And
that's right.
Opening myself up.
And
to
how
a
do
lot
you
of
know
issues.
what that vendor? I mean, what they could do with it. I mean, they literally, you've got vendors out there that just pop up a sign and say, hey, I'm such and such ABC marketing or whatever today, and it's not comfortable.
I think, and it's changing the landscape of our industry. I think, we have an abundance of agency partners available. It's kind of your choice.
That's right.
And almost too many options, I would say. And I think that will change with the implementation of some of these more advanced technology capabilities. I think we'll see some change.
Sure, for sure. So now that they're taking away these cookies, are we not going to be followed with these banner ads anymore? If I go shopping for a new boat or something, I'm not going to get the next 47 sites going to be showing me boats or something?
Well, technology is technology, so there will be some aspect that you will still be targeted in different places where you go. Now, it's going to be more contextual in many cases, where it's really about what type of site are you on. So if you're on Bass Pro, you'll probably get a boat ad, right? And so there's some contextual aspect to that.
Sure.
But through the networking effect and the ability for brands to work with their partners, there will be the ability for a dealership group to be able to target their customers and to be able to try to drive them back into, because as Amber mentioned, it's not just about the relationship on the lot, but it's on the website and also driving that back in.
Sure.
So there are capabilities that will be there. The reach and scale of that's different, and it's not as more spray and pray of just like I'm getting out there and I'm going to try to hit you 400 times across everywhere you go. It's going to be a much more targeted effort. But there are capabilities.
Yeah, my wife and I swear that they're listening at all times, because we will talk about, we should go on a cruise this summer. And all of a sudden I'll go on my computer, I'm like, well, why am I getting targeted with all these cruise ads and these banners? I'm like, what? They're listening to us, it's crazy.
It is. It's a personalized experience.
It is, there's no question. That's right. A little too personalized. Well, thank you both for coming in. I really appreciate it. Amber Daniel, the Director of Product Strategy for S&P Polk, and Kyle Hollaway, Senior Vice President and Global Identity Leader at Acxiom. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we really appreciate your insights. In part 3 in this 3-part series, Acxiom's John Campos and Pash Group founder Brian Pash discuss how to bring high-performing marketing technologies and premium data together to help dealers create personal experiences people love, and as a result, increase the likelihood that they will buy your product or service again and again. And so thank you so much, folks, for coming into the studio. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching Driving Solutions, exclusively on CBTNews.com.